Hey friends. Thanks for sharing your experience with impatience in pregnancy. Or your experience with patience for those of you who are just like super chill and low key the whole time, which is amazing. And if you, hey, Auntie Pam, if you have experienced impatience in pregnancy, it's not like a bad thing. It's not a judgment call. I've been impatient in most of my pregnancies at some time or another. But I just want to talk about it because it's a real thing for most of us at some point, because being pregnant can be challenging, or it can take a long time, or it's a brand new experience that we're, navigating for the first time, or even if it's like the fifth time. Every pregnancy is different, so who knows? So anyway, since you guys shared your experience with impatience in pregnancy, I just wanted to share mine. And impatience can arise at any time, right? If you're dealing with like difficult symptoms, if you have like crazy morning sickness and body pain and stuff like that. But I'm talking specifically about that late term end of pregnancy impatience, where it's sort of like birth is imminent, right? And you're sort of on that like pins and needles aspect. And impatience can be, it could be just excitement. And honestly, I kind of feel like maybe it's, like an evolutionary thing, like we're almost designed to become impatient because we're excited to meet our babies. But my experience with impatience at the end of pregnancy and my first pregnancy with Christopher, mine was mostly based around my due date. And I'm going to put that in quotes because I now firmly believe that babies aren't library books. They show up when they're supposed to show up. I think due dates are a bunch of bullshit. And they just give us a reason to like be hyper aware of how pregnant we are. That was my experience with Christopher. I sort of always during that pregnancy had a sense that it was going to be long. I knew I was going to go longer than 40 weeks just because, I don't know. And I spent a lot of my pregnancy sort of like preparing for like, what would I do? What would I do if it got to be like 41 weeks, 41 and a half weeks, 42 weeks? But I was like thinking about what would I do, and yet I had prenatal care where it was basically like, at 40 weeks, you're going to start, I was getting more non-stress tests, like checking baby's movement and heartbeat and all this stuff, and they were going to get more frequent as the days ticked by. And then, dun, 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 should I reach 42 weeks, I wouldn't be allowed to be pregnant anymore. If I reached 42 weeks, it was going to be like, well, time to induce. And it's only in hindsight that I can see like what cognitive dissonance this was on my part, because I wanted a natural labor and birth experience. I didn't want interventions unless they were medically necessary. And I didn't feel like being 42 weeks pregnant was any sort of medical emergency. And yet I was still seeking prenatal care from people who were telling me like, FYI, if you get to be 42 weeks pregnant, we're going to treat it like a medical emergency. We're going to you're going to be induced. That's what we're telling you. We're going to that's what we recommend. We're not going to let you, even though now I realize like nobody needs to give you permission to do whatever you're going to do. Like I could have just not shown up for all these crazy tests and all that, but that's not what I was doing. I didn't know. My discernment was not what it is now. So I reached 40 weeks, and then it was 41 weeks, and then it was 41 and 4 days, and I was going in for another non-stress test. And at this point, like the last couple weeks of that pregnancy were really challenging for me. I was really, whatever, you can put a label on it. I don't know. anxious or depressed or withdrawn or whatever. Like, I really was like watching the clock, feeling like, oh my God, when's it going to happen? How many days is it? What am I going to do? I didn't really want to like talk to my friends or see my friends. My sweet friend Carrie like came over to try to take me out to breakfast, and I literally just like hid in my house and didn't answer the door. Like, I just did not want to deal with people. I was really just like thinking I could like mentally obsess this birth to start. I don't know. And so I went in for a non-stress test at 41 and a half weeks. Everything was fine. Christopher's, moving around and happy as can be, chilling, comfortable. But the doctor was like, I mean, aren't you done? Why don't we get this baby out? And that's all I need. That's all I needed to like abandon myself and my plan of like drug-free birth, all this kind of stuff. I was just like, oh my, yes, I want, like, of course, yes, I want this baby out. Not really like thinking, oh, right, if I want this baby out and I'm not in labor, that means I'm going to be chemically induced, and there's definitely no medical emergency. Like, we just talked about that. Everything's fine. But I went for it. I was like, yeah, let's do this. And, cut to the part where I never actually went into labor, and Christopher wasn't, he was laying transverse, and then he was breech, and then again it was this whole story of, well, we can't let you leave the hospital, even though I wasn't in labor. Like, I could have just walked out and carried on super pregnant, like waiting for things to happen, but I didn't. And then I had what was essentially an elective C-section. There was no medical emergency, and I didn't really connect all these dots after the fact. I really just felt sad after that birth experience. I felt really sad that I didn't get to feel my body in labor. I felt really sad, after processing quite a bit of it. I realized like that a big piece of this sadness was that in all of my impatience, I just straight up abandoned my center. I straight up abandoned what I had been wanting and what I knew deeply was right for me, which was a physiological birth. But then all of a sudden, in this moment of impatience, when somebody was like, do you want out? I was like, yes, get me out of here, And it was really challenging. It was a lot of stuff to work through, And then with Owen, I experienced impatience early on because I really just felt not great during that pregnancy. But at 38 weeks, I was finally just like, I cannot keep going to work. I was commuting downtown on the train and walking to work, which felt good for a while. And then at 38 weeks, I was just like so gigantic and so just like, no. So I let myself off the hook and told my boss, look, I can keep working, but it's going to be from home. And as soon as my body could relax, I was fully not expecting this, but at 38 and a half weeks pregnant, as soon as I didn't have to go into the office anymore, boom, labor, birth. So I didn't even have a chance to be, for me, I was sort of expecting another long pregnancy. I was certainly expecting to go to 40 weeks. I didn't have a chance to get impatient. How delightful. And then with my pregnancy with Harrison, it was funny. Like, a lot of people were telling me they're like, oh, I don't know. I think he's going to come early, and I think it's going to be a really easy birth. It's going to be short. It's going to be this. It's going to be that. Like, I don't know why people say these things. Maybe they're just hopeful. But again, I had a sense, I'm like, I don't know. I'm not really expecting anything. I'm just gonna see what happens. I'm just gonna ride it out. And so with Harrison, I reached my due date, 40 weeks. But the difference here was my prenatal care providers, the people who I was allowing into my circle, were people who were not pathologizing a long pregnancy. And the people who were pathologizing it, I politely excluded from my circle. Like, I'd been going to get massages every week. And as soon as I reached 40 weeks and the massage therapist was like, oh, 40 weeks. Oh my gosh, when are you going to have this baby? Blah, blah, blah. And like, some people can deal with that, but I was just like, I don't have any tolerance for your bullshit. I don't want to have to explain anything to you. Like, I stopped going for massages because I just didn't want to hear this woman say like, oh my God, you're still pregnant. So I stopped going. Meanwhile, I was also going to a chiropractor, Dr. Jill, wonderful human, total truster of the human body. She was exactly who I needed to be seeing in this pregnancy. I was going twice a week for chiropractic adjustments for most of my pregnancy, which not only helped me to feel great in my body, as great as one feels at very, very pregnant, but like, as the days ticked by and the weeks ticked by, you know, she was just like, hey, here we are again, ready to get adjusted. What's going on? It wasn't, you know what I mean? Like, it was just like, yep, you're still pregnant. Okay, it's fine. It's not a problem. And it was amazing. And the more and more pregnant I got, as it was 41 weeks, and then 42 weeks, and then 43 weeks. You know, I also was really only spending my time with people who, again, like, felt like me. Like, being very pregnant was just not a problem. I was hanging out with my friend Janine a lot. You know, and what a willing sport. It was freezing cold. It's February. You know, it's like 2 degrees outside. It had snowed a ton. And it kept snowing, and I was just like, Janine, want to go for a walk? You know, like, I'd go for these long walks by myself, but, you know, sometimes it's nice to have a buddy. She'd be like, yeah, let's go for a walk in the freezing cold and the snow. So we'd go for walks. And then I'd go to her house, and she'd make me tea, and she'd rub my feet for like an hour. Like, what a saint. You know, and we'd put on like these really awesome, like, sound baths, like pregnancy sound baths that we found on YouTube. And would just hang out, and it was just like not a problem, you know? And she'd be like, and then I'd leave her house, and she'd be like, okay, well, maybe I'll see you tomorrow, but maybe not, like, TBD, no big deal. And like, it's not that I never felt impatient, because if you've ever been, I mean, if you've ever been 43 and a half weeks pregnant, for sure, but even if you've like been at 40 weeks and 41, like, when you get to the end of pregnancy, like, there's just moments. There's moments where you're just done. You're like, I want to sleep on my stomach, or I want to eat sushi, or I want to like be able to wear pants that aren't my husband's, you know, like, whatever. So it's not that I didn't experience impatience. I just recognized that what I really needed to do was to, number one, be very discerning with who is in my space, and only allow people in my space who are going to reflect back to me what I already felt deep inside, which was like, being pregnant for a long time might be kind of annoying, but it's not a problem. It's not a problem. So I had these people around me. And the other thing that I was really tapping into was, you know, just coming back to my mindset stuff. To really be like, it's not a problem to be this pregnant. I trust my body. I trust my baby. I trust the timing of everything, that this guy's gonna show up when he's meant to show up. I didn't know Harrison was boy at the time, but anyway. Like, it's all gonna be at deep breaths. Like, everything is gonna be fine. It's okay. Nobody ever stayed pregnant forever. Literally nobody's ever stayed pregnant forever. So we know the baby's gonna come at some point. And the longer and longer the pregnancy get, the closer and closer I knew I was gonna be to birth. By the way, this friendship bracelet is rockin'. I love doing this while we chat. Kind of helps my train of thought. So I was discerning with who I was letting in my circle. Doing my mindset work to like come back. Like being impatient is not a problem. And also like, it's okay. We can cultivate the patience. We can come back here. And the other thing that I was doing was also listening to podcasts or watching birth videos of stories of women who had really long pregnancies. You know, pregnancies that were 43, 44. I even remember listening to a podcast of a woman who was pregnant for 46 weeks. And part of me was like, oh my God, sweet baby Jesus, like, please don't let me be pregnant for 46 weeks. But I also, in like listening to her story, was like, okay, but a really long pregnancy is still, while it might not be like my favorite thing, while it might be really uncomfortable, it's also not a problem. And I can do it. I can do it. And I know that I can do it because I'm doing it. Like, it's happening. It's all good. So that's my experience with impatience in pregnancy. So if you are pregnant now or find yourself pregnant in the future and you find those moments of impatience arising, it's okay. You're human, right? And especially if you're an earth sign, you're here to cultivate patience. That's me. I'm an earth sign. So it's okay. It's okay to feel the impatience. It's okay to ride that wave. And then you can simply remind yourself, whether it's surrounding yourself with people who reflect that same belief that a long pregnancy, just because it's long, it's not a problem, right? To, if you choose to, take in birth stories, like take in birth stories of other women who have had really long pregnancies, right? So that you don't feel alone in this experience, like you're the only person who's ever been 43 weeks pregnant. And then the simple mindset work of coming back to like, I can do this, and I know I can do this because I'm doing it. I trust my body. I trust my baby. I trust that the baby's going to arrive on time, and I trust that I can carry him until that time is, and that I can birth him when the time is right. So thanks for joining me, friends. I love our little chats.